It's 2 a.m. The heat hasn't broken. The fan on your nightstand is just rearranging the same suffocating air in slow circles. Outside it's 40 degrees Celsius, 104 Fahrenheit, and your bedroom is somehow hotter than that because your walls spent all day absorbing the sun like a brick oven, and they're still radiating it back at you in the dark. Your air conditioner is either dead, unaffordable to run, or not there at all. And you've got work in 5 hours. Here's what nobody told you. There is a cooling system that costs $7 to build, takes 15 minutes to assemble, requires zero electricity, zero refrigerant, and zero mechanical parts. It drops room temperature by up to 15 degrees Celsius, 27 Fahrenheit, below outside air. It simultaneously filters your air, removes odors, and absorbs airborne bacteria, mold spores, and volatile organic compounds. And it was engineered into civic buildings 3,000 years ago by architects in one of the hottest deserts on Earth. We forgot about it. Not because it stopped working, because somebody figured out how to sell you something that plugs into the wall instead. Let's start with the physics, because once you understand it, everything else makes immediate sense. Your body already knows this principle. When you sweat, moisture on your skin evaporates. Evaporation is a phase change, liquid turning to vapor. Phase changes consume energy. That energy comes from heat. Your skin loses heat to the evaporation process and you cool down. That's your body's entire thermal management system, refined over millions of years of evolution. It's also why dry heat feels survivable at temperatures that would kill you in humid air. In Phoenix at 42 Celsius, the air is so dry that sweat evaporates almost instantly, pulling heat from your body fast enough to keep you functional. In New Orleans, at 34 Celsius, with 90% humidity, the air is already saturated and your sweat has nowhere to go. Same temperature, completely different experience. The physics of evaporation depends entirely on how much moisture the surrounding air can still absorb. What activated charcoal does to that principle is almost unfair. A single gram of activated charcoal has a surface area of between 500 and 1,500 square meters. Read that again. 1 gram. The size of your thumbnail, the surface area of a small apartment building. Every one of those microscopic pores holds water. When warm, dry air moves across a material that's wet, evaporation happens at a scale wildly disproportionate to the physical size of what you're looking at. The air surrenders its heat energy to the phase change. It comes out the other side, cooler, measurably, significantly cooler, having done nothing more than pass over a damp tray. This is not a DIY approximation of cooling. This is documented, peer-reviewed measured science. A 2018 study published in the Journal of Post-Harvest Technology measured activated charcoal evaporative coolers maintaining interior temperatures 10 to 15 degrees Celsius below ambient outside air. A 2022 study in the Journal of Engineering and Applied Science documented a maximum temperature drop of 11 degrees Celsius, 20 degrees Fahrenheit, in a single room. These are controlled laboratory measurements, not backyard estimates. In a heat wave, 11 degrees Celsius is not a comfort improvement. It is the difference between sleeping and lying awake until dawn, between your body recovering overnight and carrying heat exhaustion into the next day. Now here's where the history gets interesting. Because the people who built this first weren't experimenters. They were solving a survival problem in one of the most extreme environments on the planet. Persian engineers were constructing wind towers, called badgirs, as far back as 3,000 years ago, possibly earlier. A badgir is a tall shaft built into or alongside a building with openings at the top positioned to catch prevailing winds and channel them downward into the rooms below. At the base of the shaft, Persian builders placed layers of wet charcoal and saturated clay pots. Every breath of incoming air was forced through that damp material before it ever touched a person inside the building. The evaporation that happened in those few feet of charcoal dropped incoming air temperature by 4 to 6 degrees Celsius before it entered the room. Combined with the stack effect of the tower, which pulled hot air upward and out while drawing cooler air in at lower levels, these buildings maintained interior temperatures 8 to 12 degrees Celsius below peak afternoon heat, without a single moving part, without electricity, without refrigerant, without anything that needed maintenance or fuel or a warranty. The most famous surviving badgir is in Yazd, Iran. Yazd sits in one of the driest deserts on Earth. Summer temperatures regularly exceed 40 degrees Celsius. The city has been continuously inhabited for over 7,000 years. The buildings with functional badgirs, documented by architectural researchers from the University of New South Wales, ran consistently cooler than outside air throughout the hottest hours of the day, every day, for centuries. That's not an anecdote. That's a multi-millennia field trial with a sample size of an entire city. We surrounded ourselves with compressors and refrigerant and forgot that they figured this out when bronze was still a cutting-edge technology. Here's exactly what you need to build it: activated charcoal. The loose black granules sold for aquarium filters at any pet store or online. A 500-gram bag runs $5 to $8 and fills a standard baking tray. You can also use activated charcoal sold for air purifiers or bulk horticultural charcoal, which is slightly cheaper per gram. What you cannot use is barbecue charcoal briquettes. That is a completely different material, compressed and treated for combustion, not porous in the same way, and it will not produce the cooling effect. Activated charcoal only. A shallow tray, a baking pan, a plastic storage tray, a wooden box lined with plastic sheeting, anything that holds the charcoal in a layer and allows air to move across the surface. Spread the charcoal 3 to 5 centimeters deep. Water. Pour it over the charcoal until the granules are fully saturated and just beginning to pool at the bottom. Let it absorb for 5 minutes, then drain any standing water. You want the charcoal wet throughout, not sitting in a puddle. Saturated like a wrung-out sponge, not flooded, airflow. An open window with a natural cross breeze works as a passive system. A small USB fan aimed across the surface of the tray works better. Even a low-powered fan dramatically accelerates evaporation rate and the volume of cooled air produced per hour. For a fully electricity-free version, position the tray directly in the path of incoming air at your coolest window. That's the whole system. $7, 15 minutes. No tools required. Now placement, because this is where most people get it wrong and end up thinking it doesn't work. A damp charcoal tray sitting on a table in the middle of a room does almost nothing. The cooled, moist air rises, diffuses, mixes with the hot air above it, and the temperature at head and chest level barely changes. You've built something that works and positioned it so it can't. Put the tray on the floor directly at the air intake, the window or door through which outside air enters the room. Every volume of incoming air passes across the charcoal before it reaches you. That is the difference between a curiosity and a functional cooling system. Placement is everything. Re-wet the charcoal every morning. Evaporation continues overnight, even without a fan, and a dry tray is simply a tray of charcoal accomplishing nothing. 30 seconds with a cup of water reactivates the system. That's your entire maintenance routine. For a small space, a bedroom, home office, camper van, dorm room, one standard baking tray unit produces a meaningful temperature drop. For a larger room, place 2 or 3 trays at different air intake points. The effects compound. More evaporative surface area means more cooling happening before the air reaches you. Now, the version for people with animals, because this is where the technology becomes something more than a comfort hack. Activated charcoal does not simply cool air. It chemically binds to volatile organic compounds, odors, airborne bacteria, mold spores, ammonia, hydrogen sulfide, and a range of particulates. The same material used in water filtration systems. The same material inside air purifiers, retailing for $200 to $400. Doing its job passively, continuously for free, as long as it stays damp. For a chicken coop, a rabbit hutch, a barn, or a dog kennel in July. This matters on 2 levels simultaneously. Build a simple open-sided frame from scrap wood, line it with hardware cloth or mesh, fill it with activated charcoal 6 to 8 centimeters deep, and mount it in the ventilation opening where air enters the enclosure. Every breath of wind passing through that charcoal arrives cooler and cleaner on the other side. The ammonia load in a chicken coop in summer heat is not just unpleasant. It is a respiratory hazard for the animals. Activated charcoal absorbs it from the air chemically, not by masking it with something else, by removing it. Heat stress in poultry begins around 30 degrees Celsius and becomes fatal above 38. Anything that drops incoming air temperature meaningfully is not a comfort upgrade. It is an animal welfare intervention. The wall-mounted variant for a house works on the same principle at a larger scale. A charcoal-filled frame set into a window opening or mounted in front of a window fan conditions every volume of air entering the room before it reaches the living space. In a dry climate, the performance matches what the Persian engineers were documenting in Yazd 3 millennia ago. One honest note that belongs here, because the physics demands it. Evaporative cooling is a function of the moisture differential between the wet surface and the surrounding air. In dry climates, the American Southwest, the Great Plains, the Mediterranean, the Middle East, the performance is dramatic and consistent, matching the peer-reviewed numbers. In humid climates, the Gulf Coast, the Southeast, anywhere with muggy summers above 50% relative humidity, the effect is reduced because the air is already carrying significant moisture and has limited capacity to absorb more. In those conditions, expect a temperature drop of 2 to 3 degrees Celsius rather than 10 to 15. That is still useful. It is still cooling you are getting for $7 with no electricity, and the air filtration benefit operates regardless of humidity because charcoal's chemical absorption of pollutants and odors does not depend on evaporation. Set expectations based on where you live, and the system will deliver exactly what the physics says it should. To recharge the charcoal every month or two, spread it on a tray and leave it in direct sunlight for a full day. UV exposure and heat drive the absorbed compounds back out of the pores and reset the material. It does not wear out, it fills up and then empties again. One $7 bag, maintained, lasts an entire summer. Here is the number worth sitting with. A standard North American home air conditioner runs approximately 750 hours per cooling season. At average electricity rates, that is somewhere between $150 and $400 in electricity, depending on your unit, your climate, and your rate plan. That cost assumes the unit doesn't break, which they do always during the second week of a July heatwave, always when the repair technician is booked out 3 weeks and the refrigerant is backordered. The system described here costs $7, runs on water, and has no components that can fail. Persian architects engineered this into civic buildings 3,000 years ago in a desert city that has been continuously inhabited ever since. The buildings are still standing. The physics has not changed. The charcoal still has the same surface area it always had. The air still surrenders its heat to evaporation. We didn't forget this because it stopped working. We forgot it because it costs $7 and nobody profits from selling you water and a bag of charcoal. Now you know how it works. Tonight, when the heat is still sitting in the room at midnight and the fan is just moving it around, you'll know exactly what to do about it.